Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show, Joe Biden's plans to rebuild America comes with a monumental price tag, but the US president's audacious efforts could lead to a change in political order that the country hasn't seen in generations. I'll be discussing the details of the $2.3 trillion infrastructure bill with Greg Swenson, a founding partner at the emerging markets investment firm Brigg McAdam. And French energy giant Total has become the latest foreign firm to withdraw its staff from Mozambique following fierce clashes between Islamic State-linked fighters and the military. I'll be discussing the social-economic fallout from the ongoing crisis with Emilia Colombo from the Washington-based think tank, the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Then later, I'll be reporting on the biggest company news stories of the week. As always, we'll start the show with business news from here in the UK, and international travel has taken centre stage as England continues with its phased return out of lockdown. With British holidaymakers eager to book their summer trips, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has warned people it's still too soon for the government to commit to allowing holidays abroad, adding that a new traffic light system for international travel is likely to replace the current travel ban, which will be in place until May the 17th. At the earliest. The traffic light system will add green and amber categories of countries to the current red list. The vaccination rate and the level of variance in a country are likely to determine which level a country is placed at. The new proposals have been criticised by EasyJet CEO Johan Lundgren, who said the plans would open up international travel only to those who can afford it. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by our business correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, it was pretty cold over the Easter bank holiday weekend. Now everybody's talking about getting away from the summer.
Yeah, especially as we had like 1 or 2 hot days. It kind of shows what is on the horizon and what we could maybe experience if things do go according to plan. Boris Johnson earlier this week reiterated that 17th of May is the earliest that we might be able to get away on foreign holidays. Currently, the policy is that you're allowed to travel internationally for business, but really business only or very important occasions, but leisure and holidays is not one of those, and if you are caught doing that, then there's risks of a £5,000 fine. What a lot of people have been talking about recently is what seems to have been leaked from a report that's upcoming from something called the Global Travel Task Force, which I guess is something that's new that's been set up, is this traffic light kind of system, which is where you have a green, orange and a red, just in case people didn't know what the colours were, kind of thing where you have some countries which are in the green because their coronavirus rates are so low that it's okay to travel there, and then orange, there'll be certain restrictions, and we're still in very vague regions of knowing exactly what's going on. We don't know which countries, for example, are on the green, orange and red, and there'll be a range of factors involved, including the proportion of the country's population which has been vaccinated, rates of infections, things like this. So a lot of the details do need to be worked out, but it looks like this is the kind of thing that we're going to have at least this summer. And so, for example, countries like Portugal must be on the green one because our number is lower than ours at the moment. They're doing a lot better than us. But then obviously if you're going to want to go to Brazil, it's going to be in the red. So, you know, and it will affect whether when you come back to the UK mainly, do you need to quarantine? Do you need to take tests? I think everyone will probably have to take a test, but it's whether you need to quarantine in a hotel, whether you need to quarantine at home, things like that. There's also been quite a lot of fuss about vaccine passports here in the press. I think a lot of that revolves around domestic things like going to restaurants and pubs and whether you're going to be let in to indoor locations. But this is almost certainly going to happen, and it's also going to be important to happen on holidays. While no official documentation has been issued by the government so far, Mr. Johnson is saying that it will definitely become some kind of part, whether it's called vaccine passport, which seems to have got quite a lot of negative press. They'll release something along those lines and call it something else probably. But there's been a bit of reaction to this, and especially from the businesses that rely on trade and transport and people to travel into the UK. People saying, you know, that today's announcement from the Prime Minister is beyond disappointing because obviously in an ideal world, big businesses that are dependent on leisure want, you know, the airports to be open. They want people to come in, especially as the infection rate seems to have gone down so much and the vaccinations are so high and going so well. But it brings us on to restrictions, which are easing once again on Monday the 12th. Domestic holidays, so you're going to be able to travel. It's really weird saying this, we're going to be allowed to have holidays in our own country. That was always is like the worst possible scenario, but we can now do that. From Monday the 12th, they can begin again, and sort of, holiday homes will be allowed to open. Pubs and restaurants are going to be allowed to open for outdoor seating. Non-essential retail, including shops, clothing shops, also going to open. Hairdressers, nail salons, lots of people will be looking forward to that, of course. And then gyms and leisure centres, weddings will be allowed to have 15 people. So this is from Monday the 12th next week. And I think that's a really big moment for a lot of people, because that marks the return to some kind of normality after what has been 4 months of what has been a pretty hard lockdown over the winter. So yeah, things looking up, but there's still so many details yet to work out to see exactly what people are going to be able to do in the next few weeks and months.
Absolutely. Drinks on you after work on Monday,
That
Simon.
is not what I said, but thank you.
To our first topic now, which has dominated plenty of headlines over the past couple of weeks. US President Joe Biden wants to spend $2 trillion on infrastructure, hard and soft, over the next 8 years. The plan includes everything from road repairs and electric vehicle stations to public school upgrades and training for the clean energy workforce. Such a splurge, which the White House claims it will pay for by hiking corporation taxes from 21% to 28%, would be unprecedented in recent decades. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Greg Swenson, a founding partner at emerging markets investment firm Brigg McAdam. Greg Swenson, always a pleasure to have you on Channel's Business Global. It's a long list, so I won't go through all of them. 20,000 miles of road, stripping lead piping from 400,000 schools, installing 500,000 charging outlets for electric cars. I know there's a monumental price tag, but surely these needs are pressing. Can Biden get them done?
Well, I think Biden can get some of them done. But as proposed, the $2 trillion so-called infrastructure bill, I don't think we'll get any bipartisan support, because most of it's not infrastructure. It's in many ways similar to the so-called stimulus package or the COVID rescue package, which wasn't COVID and it wasn't stimulus. In this case, the $2 trillion infrastructure package, that isn't really infrastructure. But if there were, specific infrastructure elements, I think he would get bipartisan support if it actually is infrastructure and not just a Democrat or a progressive left wish list of proposals.
It's interesting you say that, Greg. The IMF, they've been conducting their spring virtual meetings this week. And when they, increased the outlook of the global recovery post-pandemic, they have cited Joe Biden's $2 trillion stimulus relief. They also cited what the Chancellor Rishi Sunak did here. So clearly that stimulus has done something. I don't want to go off topic, but I did want your response to that.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, you have a point. The stimulus package is popular because, first of all, they sent $1,400 to every American, making less than a certain, income figure. So yes, giveaways are always popular, and that does not surprise me. But much of the stimulus package didn't really go to COVID relief and doesn't stimulate the economy. If anything, it hurts the economy and wage growth.
OK, let me ask you about Biden approaching his 100-day mark. I know there have been a few gaffes, some of them not really funny, falling down the stairs while he was trying to climb Air Force One. But how do you think he's doing? I've got some poll results here. According to a March poll, 75% of voters approve the rescue plan, which we we're just speaking about, including 59% of Republicans, and 54% support these infrastructure improvements. Clearly, he's got significant political capital, wouldn't you agree?
Well, I do agree that he has political capital. I mean, he did win the election and has somewhat of a mandate, although it's surely not the mandate that you would believe from what he's proposing. The Senate is split 50-50. The House, he only has, the Democrats only have 7-seat advantage in the House, and he barely won the election. So I wouldn't call that a mandate for this progressive left, massive government intervention in the markets. But I do think that the concept of infrastructure is popular on both sides of the aisle and with Republicans as well. And the stimulus package, again, the reason it's popular is he sent checks to every American. I didn't agree with it when President Trump was endorsing that. In fact, he was endorsing the same number, 2,000 total, or 600 and 1,400. So he's got political capital because the cosmetics of these proposals are popular. But when you look under the hood and find out that there's a lot more to it than actual infrastructure or actual COVID relief, most of it is a very left-leaning progressive wish list. And for those people that actually look at the details, they would be very disappointed or concerned with that. And I think as people learn more about it, there'll be less support for it.
It's interesting you talk about the cosmetics, Greg, because interestingly, where we are in London, Boris Johnson, one of his huge mandates was the fact that he wanted to level up. And we know, especially in the Chancellor's spring budget, there's going to be a lot of swanky new buildings that are put up in the north of England and elsewhere, where some of these regions feel they've been completely ostracised from what's happening in Westminster. Isn't that kind of what's happening here with Biden, trying to level up America? I know you won't agree with this, but there was a White House historian who recently said that the Biden era could be as transformative for America in similar terms to what we saw with Roosevelt and Johnson.
Yes, Juliana, it's a great point, and I'd have to agree with that. I mean, if he were to get these proposals through, it would be transformative, not in a positive way, I assure you. If it's anything like the legacy of Johnson, I don't think that's something that I would endorse. But it will be transformative. It will make the government a much bigger player or participant in the economy and really crowding out the private economy. I don't think that's good for workers. It's surely not good for the lower wage earners in America. It's surely not good for minorities in America. So yes, it will be transformative, but not in a good way.
Before I let you go, Greg, I know you've always got your ear to the ground. What are the whisperings in Capitol Hill about Biden and his health? Will he, go on to 4 years? I know in a press briefing recently, he said he does plan to run again. Is that likely?
I would be very surprised. Look, I think he's got obvious, cognitive challenges. I really felt sorry for him during that press conference. Not only was he dishonest in many ways, but his delivery was really challenged. He had to have notes, which is very rare for a president in press conferences. So, I think, his discussion about the vaccines, I was especially disappointed with the dishonesty around the Georgia election rules. And, the economy, the filibuster, calling the governor of Texas a Neanderthal. And these were all mistakes, and they're also not true. And I think if you look at what's happening in America, the red states are doing very well because of the COVID outcomes and the economic outcomes. The blue states are doing poorly. You're seeing that in the problems that Governors Cuomo and Newsom are having in New York and California, respectively. And you're seeing it in the violence in the blue state or the blue cities or the Democrat-run cities. I was in Chicago last week. There were 35 shootings and 15 homicides. I didn't hear a word about that from the press or from President Biden. So I'm really concerned with, sort of the winners and losers in America. And right now, the states that are being run by governors like Ron DeSantis are doing really well. And the blue states are having real challenges. I think that will be reflected in the midterms for sure.
Well, only time will tell. Greg Swenson, founding partner at investment firm for emerging markets, Brick McAdam. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Great to be here, Juliana. Thank you. Great to be here.
Coming up on Channel's Business Global, I'll be discussing the social economic fallout of the ongoing crisis in Mozambique with Amelia Colombo from the Washington-based think tank, the Center for Strategic and International Studies. See you after the break. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. In a moment, I'll be speaking with Amelia Colombo from the Centre for Strategic and International Studies. But before then, here's some company news for you. LG Electronics has announced that it is closing down its loss-making smartphone business. This follows an announcement that the South Korean firm made at the start of the year, which said it was looking at all options for the division after almost 6 years of losses, totaling around $4.5 billion. Last year, it shipped 28 million phones, which compares with 256 million for Samsung. The smartphone business is the smallest of LG's 5 divisions, accounting for just 7.4% of revenue. Currently, its global market share is about 2%. Oil major BP saw its stock price increase earlier this week after announcing that the firm is reducing debt faster than anticipated, spelling good news for pension funds and income investors. The energy group said on Tuesday it expects to have hit its $35 billion net debt target within the first quarter of this year. BP plunged to a $5.7 billion loss last year and had a debt pile of $39 billion. It had expected that debt level to rise in the first half of 2021 due to several payments due. BP shares are now up around 16% this year after shedding 45% in 2020 as the COVID pandemic hit oil demand. The total market value of cryptocurrencies pushed past $2 trillion for the first time this week, doubling in about 2 months amid surging institutional demand. Bitcoin, the largest of more than 6,600 coins tracked by CoinGecko, is worth more than $1 trillion alone after its price more than doubled in 2021 to almost $59,000. The 5 next biggest coins, Ether, Binance Coin, Polkadot, Tether and Cardano, have a combined value of about $422 billion. Now to our next topic, the ongoing crisis in Mozambique. French group Total has become the latest foreign firm to suspend work at a gas plant near Palma, despite claims by authorities that order has been restored. On the 24th of March, more than 100 insurgents killed dozens of people, destroyed civic buildings and set fire to at least one bank. The coastal town is about 15 kilometres from a multi-billion-dollar natural gas investment. After hundreds of staff were forced to evacuate, there are fears that its future is under threat. The coordinated attack on Palma, a town of more than 70,000 residents, marked the biggest escalation in a violent campaign that has so far left more than 2,500 people dead and more than 700,000 people displaced. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Amelia Colombo from the Washington-based think tank, the Centre for Strategic and International Studies. Amelia Colombo, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. Hundreds have been killed, tens of thousands of people have been displaced in Mozambique. How concerned are you about this ongoing crisis?
I'm very concerned. I think what we saw in Palma 2 weeks ago was really a continuation of a phenomenon that had developed last year, where we saw the insurgents shifting from attacks against isolated villages and individuals toward more coordinated, sophisticated attacks against district capitals. In one instance, even capturing the capital of the district of Mocimboa da Praia. We see the group now has a significant presence along the primary north-south paved road of the province. They've disrupted travel on the alternate land route that runs north and south, and with the capture of Mocimboa da Praia, extended the conflict into the maritime space. We saw them become even bolder in their target selection towards the end of the year, where we saw in October an attack into Tanzania that had some political overtones, as well as a threat to the town of Mueda, which is the birthplace of the ruling Frelimo party, enough to create significant displacement, although they never quite made it to the town. And finally, at the end of December, we saw an initial attack against Palma, sort of a warning of what was likely to come. The insurgents have great momentum on their side at this time.
Absolutely. I first heard about this, Amelia, a couple of weeks ago in a business rag. A lot of the business journals are picking up on this issue. Clearly, there's got to be some serious social and economic fallout from these. What are they?
I think what makes headlines, of course, is Total and their decision to, back in January, reduce to a skeleton staff and then last week pull everyone out. And of course, it's a significant investment, the largest in Africa. But I think in terms of immediate impact, we need to look closer to the ground. I think first, behind Total's departure, you're leaving an economic infrastructure that was depending on some economic activity from the investments, the hotels, the restaurants, the security staff, translators, people who are now out of a job. When you consider that we now have 700,000 people that are displaced, that has a huge impact on the local economy. Half of those displaced are children who, granted, probably were not economically productive, but all those adults who had been cultivating plots of land where they would sell food in the market, small-scale businessmen, professionals, teachers, medics, who are now out of jobs and out of homes. I think even in communities where people have not been displaced. These host communities, you see a huge impact in terms of households that have now doubled or tripled in size, but are still constrained by the resources they have at hand. We've seen reports of prices going up as a result of shortages, but also a degree of price gouging as people take advantage of the aid systems in place. So the economic impact is something that has been, I think, growing for the past couple of years and is really coming to a head now as the humanitarian crisis in particular worsens and investments start to taper off.
Absolutely, Amelia. At the start of our discussion, you really gave quite a detailed timeline of these events. Of course, this isn't a story that started on the 24th of March. It's been growing over the past couple of years. Some of the observers have described the most recent attacks in Palma as an inflection point in what is could be described as Africa's most ignored war. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I do. I think the impact this attack on Palma had in terms of both the humanitarian situation and the direct impact on the expatriate community really elevated the profile of this conflict internationally. For the first time, we saw statements from the United States and from Spain condemning the violence. Portugal, the European Union, the African Union, a host of organizations and countries and individuals came out condemning the violence in a very forceful way as compared to other incidents. I think for the first time, we're seeing grassroots pressure on regional governments to do more in terms of mitigating the impact of this violence. In South Africa, for example, we have families who are directly impacted by the violence, making demands on the South African government, both in terms of assuring the security of their citizens abroad and in terms of taking a closer look at what is happening in Mozambique and its impact. In Tanzania, we have citizens demanding their government do more in helping to locate missing Tanzanians as a result of this particular incident, and again, creating greater awareness and demand for action locally. I think we have to look at the other side of the coin as well. This particular incident really elevated the profile of this conflict, probably in the jihadist community. And what are the implications of that? It's quite possible that as this conflict profile is elevated in these circles, we may see more interest among veteran foreign fighters looking for a good fight to come and lend their aid in Mozambique as well.
We know the details are murky. Authorities are suggesting that they've got things under control, at least in Palma. What are your forecasts of what should happen over the next couple of weeks?
I think the government has a long road ahead of it. I think in the next couple of weeks, it'll be important to secure Palma once again. I think it'll be important to start taking steps towards not only providing for the physical security of citizens in the province, but also making plans to address some of those social, economic, political issues that are driving the conflict. I think Mozambique would benefit through greater intelligence sharing with neighboring countries, improving coordination between the military and the police so that they can provide a more comprehensive security response when it is required, and working with the international community in addressing the humanitarian issues and the underlying issues that are driving this conflict to really start working on a long-term solution to insecurity in Cabo Delgado.
Absolutely. There's a long road ahead, isn't there? Amelia Colombo from the Center for Strategic and International Studies from San Francisco. Thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. Sadly, that's all we have time for today, but do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.